Hello, here we go with Patron Q&A for December, number 11, I think, if I'm counting correctly. And we have here a question from Pablo. Now, I'll have to paraphrase slightly. It concerns the site Story Games, which ran from 2005 to 2017, I think. And I was commenting on the Discord about the flaws in the site and in passing, and Pablo wanted more information. And of course, this could be one of those, ooh, dirt, talk bad about people. I doubt it. Let's put a positive interpretation on this and say, we'll talk history. He asked, did my comment refer to Andy Kikowski not actively or purposely moderating? That's Pablo's guess, and the answer is no. That's actually not quite it. So where do we start? Okay, for those who do not know or do not remember in detail, the Forge was begun originally as Hephaestus Forge in 1999 and was renamed the Forge in 2000 and given a format. In both phases, founded very much by myself, and at first with Ed Healy, and then later with Clinton Nixon, or in that second phase with Clinton. So that continued for a few years, and in 2005, Andy Kitkowski created a site called Story Games. Now, this arose out of the Forge and is effectively, although with some friendly talk, but effectively a defiance, saying, we want a new kind of place. And Andy had spoken before. I had actually, criticized people for posting at the Forge for attention, as opposed to the mission and purpose of the site. Andy cops to that. He said, I admit, I post for attention. We also had these birthday forums, which Clinton created and opened once a year on the anniversary of the Forge, which was just basically a great big kind of open forum for chit-chat. I hated them. I despised the birthday forums, and I gritted my teeth, every year until they were done. And as I said, Andy started this new site, and he said it'll be like the birthday forum all year long. And he also spoke about it as where the cool kids of the Forge can hang out like it's RPGNet. Now, all of this is basically, vomit-inducing as far as I was and am concerned. Everything that I just said is what on earth? And the good side came from the term. At the time, it seemed like a very good idea. A great deal of pushback against work at the Forge and the Forge booth at Gen Con was that these aren't real role-playing games. So a number of us, kind of looked at each other and said, well, it's not like we have to call anything a thing. Who cares? So people sought for another term. Now, from my perspective, I was thinking of this as very much an individual choice. You called it whatever you wanted to call it. If you wanted to call it a role-playing game, fine. If you wanted to call it, a zebra, fine. It's your thing. Call it what you will. Whether it's promotional or thinking about a target market or because it suits your aesthetics or whatever you want to call it. That's great. Whatever. Little did I understand that from a number of other people's point of view, they were very much thinking about branding a particular set of ideas about how to play, and treating it as a fixed thing, and very much in, a brand, and then promoting that thing to do as a new hotness, as product across all these different titles. But as I said, that was in 2005, 2004. That outlook was kind of, more like secret rumbles than a stated a purpose. When Andy chose the name Story Games, he meant fiction making. He said, look, apparently there's baggage with the word role-playing. People feel ownership about it. Fine. All we know is that these things produce some kind of fiction for whatever purpose, and so why not call them story games? Which, in the face of it, is actually fairly rational. A big part of it was that there was no other meaning. So this makes a lot of sense. I mean, it has no meaning, so designating this is useful. Just if you don't want to call it a role-playing game, you don't have to, and that's the only definition. But that quickly changed. Now, how this came about, I watched in front of my eyes in some repulsion, and I must say that I was completely in conversation with a number of these different people, both people that I was very happy with, people that I grew to realize that I disliked their values very much. And that over the next 3 years, it became apparent that Story Games was in a phenomenally toxic place. Part of it was infrastructural. There were features that are unconscionable. The capacity, for example, in a forum conversation to designate who could and could not read your comments, so that there would be shadow commentary between secret, little buddies running through this set of comments. Some people posting in all innocence, not knowing that half the people in the conversation are, conversing about them and their comments without them being able to see it. They were called whispers. And I saw that it had this feature, and I think when I understood that was the day that I ceased to post there. Very many other such things were embedded in that software. This was, again, 2005, and if you want to go and watch the movie The Social Network, which is about what later was created on Facebook, etc., well, places like this is where all of those toxic elements cut their teeth. So this is where they were born, is in this kind of forum and dialogue software. Blogs were beginning to hit hard, but social media, as we now know it, hadn't really kicked in. But this is where it was baked, just like in comments on Amazon and all sorts of those other terrible places. So all of that is happening. Story Games is totally rife with this. And it is very clear that a number of people swiftly saw, okay, we're away from the Forge. We can brand this thing. Now, I will tell you, in 2004, a number of people, Luke Crane, centrally, and a few other people were very determined to brand the Forge. The success of the Forge booth and the regard that we were receiving from a large number of people, and the boom of participation, and the sudden appearance of all these bottom feeder industry people wanting to get on the Forge, and me going, fuck yourself. All these things were occurring, and it became evident in retrospect that this was a fairly concerted push. John Harper is another individual involved with this. There was also kind of the snot-nosed guys who said, screw you, we can do what we want, we're the young rebels. And they all eventually sort of changed their views on this. But for a little while, it was very exciting to be, at Story Games where the action is now. And we're all going to be successful. It was kind of this huge thing of you're going to self-actualize and makes lots of money. And, it's a personal mission and it's a business, yay. So all of that kind of logic and worldview took on a hysteria there. And the way that Andy wanted it to go, and the way that he said he wanted the site to be, the way people to be conducted, was that people knew how to be nice to each other, and that his only moderation would be when someone harshed the Zen. That's exactly how he put it. Basically, he would just, watch the site and see that, as long as everyone was cool, it'll be great. And this, the success in this, I think, is very easily demonstrated when I say that Andy stepped away from the site by about a year. He lasted about a year. And stepped away from the site, stopped moderating it, stopped owning it, all the rest of it very soon. I think you can see what I'm talking about. The place had become a complete cesspit of status, anxiety, basically suborning. I mean, new people would show up, instead of saying, what do you want to do with your game? What's it like? You know, what do you like to play? It was very much like, oh, do it like this, do it like this. And this is where the modern day notion of, you know, the indie game, the story game comes from. I can name a few such games that were quite decent, but not that many that were created a little while later. You might say, Ron, what about Polaris? Ron, what about Primetime Adventures? Ron, what about Inspectors? Ron, what about, aren't these all the story games? No, those actually were built in the prior years. And in the very first few years of story games, but with extreme participation at the Forge. So no, I don't give story games credit for producing a lot of good games. I give story games criticism for socially enforcing and economically supporting only the people who abided by the fashion. You know, you needed to look like this game, to look like that game. And I actually don't really think many of them are very good. So, and that continues to this day. So I have very little good to say about it. I think Andy was extraordinarily naive about human beings and about purpose of participating on the internet. He's not alone. Many, you know, friendly, nice, basically nice IT people are now on record saying that when a few years later, they put in all those likes and all those, you know, things, all those features that characterize social media today, that they thought they were being nice. They thought that they were making the internet a nicer place and more open and about human connection. And they basically turned it into a heap of human foulness. And I think Andy is not unique in this. I think he is, however, perfect as an example. And if anybody had been watching, they could have, in 2005 through 2008, seen this happen across all such venues of this kind and not done what they did in things like Facebook, Twitter, and etc. So there you have it. Anybody pissed off by that? Good. So next we have JC's question, which is, I'm really looking forward to this. In the Riddle of Steel, one type of spiritual attribute is destiny. Let's stop right there. Okay. The Riddle of Steel, right? Published by Jake Norwood in 2002. And the very first printing, when I met Jake at the Gamma Trade Show in 2001, I think, before it was released, or 2002. 2002. And he had these, or rather, he had this Riddle of Steel, which is, as you see here, you're looking down on a guy. That's the top of his head. He's raising his sword. And he, basically, this was his dream. He was a young guy. He was about 20. And this was this huge dream of his. And it's a nice book here. It's got, lots of pictures and all sorts of stuff. And very soon after meeting me, and after we played a lot of games together and stayed very tight in contact, and he hopped onto the Forge, set up a forum of his own, as did many, and very quickly, for the very next printing, revised the game a little. And so the second one looks exactly the same as the first. There's actually no indicator. They even have the same product number. So that can be a little confusing, right? They're both 1001. So you don't really know, whether you have one of the original printing or whether you have the, Jake's, okay, now I'm done, this is the way I want it version. The differences are subtle, and not very extensive, but I think that they're very directed. The same thing you would know, by the way, from the very original printing of Burning Wheel and its next one. That same pattern was repeated almost exactly. But the interesting issue is that he and I worked hard on understanding his rules for spiritual attributes. Now, he had been inspired by Pendragon, but they are not the same. And briefly, the spiritual attributes are bonus dice. In the Riddle of Steel, you're rolling a whole bunch of dice and looking at the result, and the more dice, the better. And the spiritual attributes, when employed, basically give you bonuses. We worked over how that works pretty hard. I have a very straight from the horse's mouth, straight off the table, dice clattering, characters doing things, awareness of exactly how they work. Dodging exactly how they work became something of a cottage industry among fans of the game. Many of the time, I found myself, reading something that somebody was expostulating about and going, I could correct, and thinking to myself, no, I'm better off just not messing with this person's desire to play basically another game than this one. Okay, so the spiritual attributes are conscience and destiny, luck, passion. And there's one other. It's like the Seven Dwarfs. I always forget one. But anyway, so there's a bunch of them. Only 5. And there's one thing about them that's the case for them all. You can, they have a cap, which I believe is 5 dice each. And you can, at any point, spend them away. And they get erased. You can erase them. And they go into improvement points. And you can choose whether they go into improvement points for your current guy, whose attributes can go up, or whether they'll be saved for the next guy after this one bites the dust. So you kind of set them aside for, that dude eventually, whoever you make later, to be a more powerful character. So that's one thing you could do with your spiritual attributes, is just use them as an improvement bank. They also, how do these pools go up and down during play? They each have slightly different rules. So just keep that in mind. There are ways for the dice, for your spiritual attribute, no matter where it started, to get increased to a cap of 5, or in some cases to decrease. It's like, oh, well, look what you just did. Okay, let's just erase a point off of your conscience or whatever. So those can happen. Now, what, again, are they for? They're for bonuses during specific activities, different ones for each. And that's called using, not spending. But when you use them, they are used up and they have to refresh at some point. Usually it's at the end of the session or something like that. But the idea is that you, when you use them, they will go away most of the time. So they would go away, not permanently, but they're not usable immediately. So using and spending, 2 different things.